Do you dream of a garden brimming with life, where bird song fills the air, butterflies dance on the breeze, and bumblebees flit among the flowers? A wildlife-friendly garden doesn't have to be wild and messy. In this video, I'll show you how to create a beautiful, well-designed space that welcomes nature while staying romantic, refined, and serene. And stick around until the end because I'll be designing a wildlife garden for you in real time. Hi, I'm Anna Fable. I love creating these videos for you here where we can kind of share our love of nature. If you like these kinds of videos, please do like this video and subscribe if you're not already. It really does help us out. Okay, now gardening is all well and good, but the real question is, do backyard gardens actually enhance biodiversity? Is what we're doing here helping anything? And the answer? A resounding yes. Dr. Mark Goddard of Northumbria University, along with researchers from Georgetown University, Arizona State University, University of Massachusetts, and the Vermont Center for Eco Studies, shout out to Vermont, analyzed data on the value of residential outdoor spaces as habitats. Their research found that residential yards provide critical habitats for at-risk species, including birds, pollinators, and mammals. The study advocates for practical management activities in these spaces to promote biodiversity, suggesting that collective efforts in residential areas can significantly contribute to conservation goals. And if you're interested in learning more about this, they were featured in the scientific journal Bioscience. Let me put something into perspective for you that I found really empowering. So an estimated 30% of all land in the continental United States is residential. That's 4 times more area than lands classified as protected. So think your state parks, your wildlife sanctuaries, 4 times that amount for our backyard gardens. Think about how much potential there is to make a greater difference in biodiversity if we just garden in our backyard. And even in small spaces, the smallest of spaces can help. Our balcony gardens. I made even a video here recently about balcony gardening, which I was really proud of. I thought it was such a fun video. So if you're interested in that and you have a small space, I'll link that up here. But even in a small space, with the right practices, we can truly make a huge impact. And I won't go through all these scientific studies because there are actually 408 articles on the biodiversity of residential gardens from 1981 to 2022. So it's a lot to go through. But a comprehensive review published in Biodiversity and Conservation found that plant and invertebrate diversity often correlated with garden habitat complexity. And when I think about garden habitat complexity, the first gardening style that comes to mind is cottage gardens. So lucky for us, the science is in, and just having your backyard garden is going to make a powerful impact on the biodiversity in our areas. So now let's jump right in and talk about how to design your very own wildlife garden. The key to a successful wildlife garden is balance. So what does wildlife need? What do any of us need? You know, we need food, we need shelter, and we need water. So you can provide all of these things for the wildlife in your garden while also keeping it beautiful and romantic and clean and tidy, whatever gardening style you prefer. The key to this is keeping the design intentional and elegant. So now you want to start with the right plants. Variety is the spice of life. So you want to have a variety of different plants in your garden. Beautiful flowers and shrubs and trees. These provide essential nectar and seeds for pollinators and birds. Think diverse plants, diverse wildlife. Now, adding native species is a great way to enhance the biodiversity in your garden. There have been studies that have shown that native species help with biodiversity in urban gardens, so it's a great way to begin. And you want to have variety in all aspects. So a variety of different heights, a variety of different types of plants, and a variety of different colors and shapes and structures of flowers. Different flowers provide different opportunities for different pollinators, for different insects in your garden. And this is really fantastic for us as gardeners, because if you are pairing a bunch of different plants that look very similar, that have similar leaf structure, I'm looking here because my little bouquet, but if you're looking at something that has the same leaf structure, the same flower structure and type and color, it's not that exciting to look at, you know? But if you have a diversity of different structures of leaves and flowers all together, that's what creates this beauty in a garden, to me personally. And I think creating that in a cottage gardening setting is so wonderful. Broad-leaved things like lamb's ears next to a beautiful spilling kind of ground cover like Nepeta, next to a gorgeous verbena, different colors of leaves, different shape of leaves, different colors and shapes and sizes of flowers. These are fantastic ways of just allowing for more diversity in the wildlife that's called into your garden. You're opening up our opportunities for different species to come and feast. So try things like foxgloves, lavender, echinacea, or wild roses. These are both beautiful and beneficial. Some of my favorites that I haven't mentioned already are things like salvias. Salvias are so fantastic for inviting wildlife into the garden. Some of the salvias that are very tubular, things like rock and deep purple salvia, they are fantastic for attracting our native hummingbirds to feast on that nectar. They come up and visit those flowers every single day, multiple times a day. The whole family of hummingbirds, the whole flock comes and feasts on the salvias. They love the salvias. Salvias are fantastic. Other ones like plain the blue salvia, another one of my favorite salvias, are fantastic for attracting butterflies. Bumblebees love those. Honeybees, all different types of bees love the salvias in our garden. So that's one of my favorites for calling in the pollinators. Other things that I've noticed the pollinators absolutely love are certain umbellifers, things like, Queen Anne's lace that grows wild here, and I encourage it to grow wild. I think it's beautiful and ruffly and frosty and gorgeous, and the bumblebees and everything loves that plant, which is so amazing. The hydrangeas, wildlife absolutely loves the hydrangeas. We have tons of different types of hydrangeas. I think the one probably that the most diversity of pollinators comes and lands on for us are the open kind of lace cap. Invincibelle is, I think, one of those. It's called like pollen, pinky pollen, something like that. And that one, just the pollinators go crazy for. It's like a ring of pinky pollen. Wish I could remember, but it's just beautiful pad. And as the buds start to sort of froth out, then all of the pollinators just go crazy. And that's an earlier blooming hydrangea compared to some of the other ones, like the panicle hydrangeas and things like that. So that's great just to have more of that diversity and more of that, food for all of your different insects and friends in the garden. But then I noticed tons of things on the sedum, on the Nepeta, we talked about that, but a combination, of perennials, of bulbs, of shrubs, of annuals, of all different kinds of things, of trees, flowering trees. In our area, we have lots of native phlox, we have native serviceberry trees, elderberries, and things like that. But only you can know what's native in your area. So here's a tip for that. Sometimes your garden center will know the native species in your area, but if they don't really have any resources or a way to sort of share that with you, one way to do that is you can contact your local parks and rec, your local wildlife, and just ask them what kind of resources they have for figuring out the native plants. They might know, but if they don't know, they'll definitely get you in contact with somebody who does. Maybe a university in your state that has a list of that. Most universities in states here will have a list of those species. And then if that's not available to you, then check out a public garden in your area or a private garden in your area. Something, that has to have a staff that's working, that has a horticulturist that works in that garden space. Very often they will know what the local native species are. So check in with them, find out what the native species are, and then play around with those in your garden, kind of freckling them in, peppering them in, including them, or just filling your entire garden with native species. So in terms of choosing your plants, another thing that I love to think about is just early food sources for those critters. So think the earliest things that we can plant that are going to start to provide food for all of those wonderful little helpers. In terms of bulbs, some of my favorites are crocuses and iris reticulatas. There's a variety of crocus that blooms really, really early. It's the Timasianus crocus, that's the really kind of pointy petaled one, that blooms before the Dutch crocuses, so that's a great one. Just the bees are all over that as soon as they start to bloom, which is incredible. But yeah, different types of Iris reticulata. I've noticed that in particular the blue Iris reticulata is really Harmony is the name of the variety that we have in our garden. That one is particularly fantastic for inviting pollinators into the garden. But hyacinths, grape hyacinths, daffodils, ice follies blooms pretty early for us. And then early tulips. These are fantastic for providing much needed food for those early pollinators and early critters who are really hungry after a long, long, long winter. So some of the earlier varieties of tulips are Scarlet Baby. That's the earliest variety of tulip that we've been able to find. It's a really punchy, vibrant red color. And I have that paired with this deep purple Iris reticulata. And I think that purple and red pairing is really gorgeous. If red isn't your fan, you're not a fan of red. I know that there are other they're usually smaller statured tulips, kind of look a little bit like early crocuses with those kind of pointy petals, but they are really, really beautiful. There's a variety that's white and pink. Let me see if I can find it. I mean, with so many of these things, when you are looking for the earliest blooming tulip, they're going to show you things that for us bloom really, really late. So, Scarlet Baby, that's my biggest suggestion. If I'm able to find that one I was thinking of, I'll leave it linked down below. But you can also go to bulb sites, like things like Color Blends, and just type in earliest blooming or early blooming, and then see what comes up. Maybe they'll have that variety. If you found it, let me know. Or if you have any other bulbs that bloom really early for you, that would be fantastic. But all of those that I mentioned, the pollinators and all of the insects just go crazy for super early. They're so hungry. They're so hungry. And then some perennials that I love for those early blooms are things like Brunnera, lungwort. Oh my gosh. The hummingbirds go to the lungwort and the bleeding hearts right away. They just go crazy for those. So that's pulmonaria. And then bleeding hearts, they changed their name recently. Bleeding hearts is, the Latin name is Dicentra, but they've recently changed it to something else. But bleeding hearts is the common name for that. And the hummingbirds absolutely love those, as do the bumblebees and everything. And you can get those in in pinks and whites. So you can find something for your garden that'll fit beautifully. Things like tiarella, hellebores, forsythia, creeping phlox, bloodroot, trillium, and then ajuga and lamium. Those are some ground covers that definitely bloom earlier in the season. And next up is water. Water is a must for any wildlife-friendly space. A sleek bird bath, a gently trickling fountain, or a small pond. These can serve both as a focal point for your garden design, so really featuring that space, whether it's you have hedges that are drawing you to this focal point, or the borders are leading you, or a winding path to this focal point of a water feature, or kind of tucked away, a little gentle wildlife pond in a corner of the garden. These beautiful water features are a lifeline for visiting creatures. Just keep the water clean and shallow, and make sure that you have a few little rocks or a way that our little friends can easily come and access the water and easily come back out. So for example, I have a little bird bath, and I like to put some rocks, almost like little stepping stones, for the birds or creatures to come and sort of climb their way into the water. And these are wonderful design features for any garden. The babbling little water feature is just such a beautiful way to invite more of your senses into the garden. You could really play with that with a sensory garden and really emphasize scents, really fragrant blossoms. Those fragrances are there for a reason. They are there to attract more pollinators, more insects to that plant. So really playing around with a bunch of different types of really beautiful, fragrant flowers, and having a water feature for the sound, and then have a little space for you to sit and really take it all in. Remember, this is your space too. You are cohabitating with these wonderful friends in the garden, with the bumblebees and the hummingbirds and all of the other birds and the little critters, the chipmunks, the squirrels, the toads, the newts, the frogs, everything in your garden. It's so fun to be able to be there. So have a space for you in the garden as well. well. Create a cozy seating area where you can enjoy the sights and sounds of your wildlife haven. Use natural materials, things like wood or gravel or, cobblestone paths. We just made a cobblestone path from the rocks in our garden. You can also have decorative trellises. We have trellises that are made from fallen logs on our property, from fallen branches. We've kind of created Robinson Crusoe style trellises and arches and arbors and tripods. So this way you're kind of allowing your gardening space and the hardscape to kind of blend seamlessly together. And then those areas can kind of become habitats for wildlife in and of themselves. On our arch that we've created, we have a bunch of different climbers growing up it, and we have a little hummingbird house there that so many birds go and land on it all the time. There are little insects that crawl up it. Now this does mean that we have to replace it pretty often. We're probably going to replace it this year, and it might be with something wooden, something man-made, but it's just fantastic. It's a fantastic way of just inviting more of that kind of natural element to the garden. And with a cottage garden, it just looks so at peace and in harmony when you have those things that are found objects that can really find a home in the gardening space. So now we've given them water, we've given them food sources, and now they need shelter. Wildlife needs shelter too, but that doesn't mean an overgrown jungle, unless you're into that. Log piles, rockeries, and even hedges offer refuge for small creatures scuttling about while adding texture and structure to your garden. So now you can have a little brush pile somewhere on your space, depending on how large your garden is. But you can also do something much more manicured, much more put together. A rockery, like I said, could be fantastic for that. But you could also do something really charming like a bug hotel or a little bug house. Creating bird houses in our gardens it's so beautiful and they add such interest. But you can make a bug hotel that looks so beautiful and interesting. And it's a really fun DIY project, especially if you have kids who like to kind of get involved in crafts. You can go and forage for things like pine cones and pine needles. You can take different, foraged logs and things like that and drill holes in them to create little spaces for nooks and crannies for bugs to hide. But creating a bug hotel can be a really fantastic way of inviting in all of that wildlife, providing them a shelter, a little home, but also making it look nice and tidy and intentional in your space. And I've seen really creative gardens and garden designers create bug hotels into a seating area or into the side of a border. So there was a garden that I visited. I've been talking about them a lot lately, but this gardener had put together a beautiful bug hotel as their kind of retaining wall. And then they built up their border inside of it, their gardening border inside of it. So something like that, be creative, use what you have and create these spaces for wildlife to thrive. And finally, don't forget the magic of nighttime. Planting flowers that emit their scent in the evening to attract nighttime and twilight pollinators is a fantastic way to extend the type of insects that are in your garden, increasing the biodiversity. So planting things that emit their scents in the evening. And then you can have some lovely little solar lights and just sit out there enjoying your beautiful garden. And a lot of these flowers that emit their fragrances at night, they're lighter in color. And lighter colors, things like ivories and whites and soft purples and soft yellows, these are some of the last colors that we can see as the light of the sun fades. So things like angel trumpets and nicotiana or tobacco plant, those are great ones to add to the garden. And finally, my last tip is just sort of a mindset shift. Nature is not a destination to be visited. Nature is our home. So let's agree to appreciate the wildlife in our gardens, all of the wildlife. If we don't have the caterpillar, then we don't have the butterfly. So that means that sometimes our plants will have some nibbles in them. But let's agree to see that as embroidery. A lacy leaf of kale, a polka dotted hosta. Embrace sharing your garden with wildlife, because that's really part of the joy of it. All right, now that we've covered all of my tips for a wildlife garden and designing that wildlife haven of your dreams, let's go ahead and dive into our design. All right, here's our lovely little AI home here. So let's go ahead and make this into a wildlife garden, a beautiful wildlife garden. So many of our gardens are going to look sort of like this. This looks like a very, residential garden. It's a really residential yard space. You have lots of grass, planted along the outsides. Nothing wrong with that. But we can really make this more of a wildlife haven by creating lots of different habitats, diversity of plants, and that'll encourage a diversity of wildlife. So we are going to imagine that this is in my growing zone so that we can do native species that I'm really familiar with. So let's pretend that this is in Vermont, and let's pretend it's in a zone 5A. That is where I garden if you're curious. Vermont zone 5A. So let's go ahead and start by getting rid of some of this lawn. This is too much lawn. Something that's fantastic if you kind of like the look of a lawn but want to try something that's a little bit more wildlife friendly. Clover lawns are really fantastic. They're so great for those early bees who stay close to the ground because the little clover comes up very close to the ground. So that's just something to think about, but I know it's not everyone's style. There we go. Now we have some planting space. Next up, let's add a little path to go through it. So there we go, a little paver stone pathway going through the garden. So now let's start with some native trees and shrubs. Okay, so according to the University of Vermont, some of the native species here in Vermont include oak, black cherry, birch, red maple, and serviceberry. These are great for a host of different insects and caterpillars, and those insects and caterpillars provide food to native bird species. So let's put in some of those. I definitely want to do some serviceberries, but if you don't want to block out any sun, you don't have to do anything too huge. Yeah, let's do one of these. So let's plunk these kind of on the sides here. And if you repeat these, it'll provide a nice cohesion in the garden space. But this is really a superhero when it comes to inviting wildlife into your garden. Plus, any larger trees or shrubs are gonna provide a, shelter for birds and hummingbirds and all kinds of things. Let's say we wanna do an oak tree, and I'm gonna kind of cheat this and put this in the front yard. We're gonna pretend this is the backyard, and so we're gonna cheat this and kind of put this back here like that. There we go. Okay, so now we have some structure on the outside. It's not gonna shade out anything. Then let's go ahead and add our water feature. I wanna do a bird bath here. And let's see, this little mushroom one is cute. There's a terracotta one. I have a stone bird bath that I really love. This one has some stones in it already, so that'll definitely help the little critters. It's a little landing pad or a little stepping stone into the water there. Great. So I'm going to start with all of my natives first, just to kind of create that bone structure throughout the garden, and then we'll fill it in with all different kinds of things. So next up, let's do some dogwoods. So I'm going to do a pink dogwood, and we'll kind of play around with that. And I'm going to put this in the perimeter just so you have lots of space in between to kind of play around with other things. And then we have shrub willows that grow everywhere. So let me go ahead and see what we can do with that. Yeah, this will do. We'll tuck a bunch of these in. Great, so it's looking really cohesive without looking too formal. You're just able to kind of catch similarities through the borders without that formality, which you can do. You can do a formal garden for sure that's also wildlife friendly, but this way we have a little bit of both. And then let's do some native perennials. So Joe Pieweed is one of our native perennials. So I definitely want to go heavy on those in this garden. A little cluster right in front of that willow. Then I want to do another little cluster in front of this willow. Yeah, and I want to do these on either side. Again, creating some cohesion, but there's still interest, still different on either side. Gardening with Creekside always says, these are sisters, not twins. Another native for us is asters. These are everywhere. We have these beautiful purple and white asters that bloom all around our property through the woodland, which is gorgeous. So we can just have some asters. Let me see if I can find any that look similar to the ones that we have. New England aster. That'll do. Ours are a little bit taller than that because they're growing in a woodland. So I want to pop these asters around our water. I think that'll be really nice. And then goldenrod. Goldenrod is a native perennial for us. It does really take over, so a lot of people kind of pull it out of their gardens, but we have some in our garden, and I honestly want to encourage it to go throughout the garden because it's wonderful in herbalism. You can use it for teas and tinctures and things. It's an amazing plant. But we're going to leave that out of this garden in particular, but you could also do some native sunflowers, which are native to our area. Let's do some sunflowers. Let's just tuck a few in here. Maybe I'll do a few right by the front of the path. That's sweet. And sunflowers do get quite tall, but they also, it's quite easy to kind of see through them. So you can still see the Joe Pye weed there in the back. Oh, I forgot to finish off my Joe Pye weed. Let's do some more of those over here. There we go. All right, great. So those are all of our native species. So you can really have a beautiful garden with just native species, especially if you filled the rest in with kind of goldenrod and things like that. But we want to have a huge variety of different flowers and different types. So let's add in some hydrangeas. And I kind of want to see if they have an invincible type, a lace cap. Yeah, great. Beautiful. I love that purple color. Gorgeous. So let's tuck this in on either side. Let's maybe even do them on either side here of our bird bath, like that. And then we can pop it on this side as well. Maybe tuck it in there. So I'm gonna imagine that this side, as we're looking at it, the right side of the path is a little bit shadier. So I'm gonna put a few things in that can handle a little bit more shade. I'm gonna put in some pollinaria. And again, these things aren't gonna bloom all at the same time, but this will give you a feel for it. So let's put some of this kind of closer to the path over here. Just at the feet of the sunflowers there. I kind of wanna add another water feature, maybe down here. I wonder if I can do that. I'll do that in a minute. I'm gonna add a few more pollinaria. I'm gonna add them right in front of this Joe Pye weed here. Kind of filling in the space in the front. Lovely. So on the other side, let's add some sedum. Autumn pink sedum. Looks like autumn joy. This I've just found is such a pollinator magnet. So let's tuck this in on this side of the path. It actually looks the sedum looks kind of similar to the Joe Pye weed. So we'll kind of play with that. We'll make it here at this bend in the path. So you still have a clear view of your bird bath there. And we'll create a little bit of an opening. So I'm leaving a little bit of space there so you can access the bird bath. And then I'm just repeating this one more time here. Now let's add Nepeta for early color. And I love Nepeta so much. It's fantastic for pollinators, early blooming, like I said, so it's great for those hungry pollinators right at the start of spring, and it's also fantastic because it can do sun and shade, so we'll put this on both sides here of the path. Lovely, something like that. I think that's really nice. Kind of freckled through as you're walking down the path. It's not exactly perfect, but it's really nice. Let's do some phlox. We can do some creeping phlox. Let's do this kind of a little patch. And let's do that near our lungwort, kind of coming onto the path a little bit. There we go, that's nice. And then let's do some of the purple and white phlox. Great one for attracting wildlife. I'm gonna do this a little bit farther up here in the front of this path. And then I'll repeat that on the other side. Maybe even tuck this one a little farther back. And maybe we'll flank this with the sedum. Put the sedum. Let's say that this evergreen tree here allows the sun to come into this area. So we're getting a little bit more sun on the side of the path so we can make the sedums flank this path in a really beautiful way. And we have the phlox, very pretty. We can do a different variety of phlox, maybe some of the white phlox. Let's have a little cluster over here, and then let's do a few on the other side. And while phlox is happiest in the sun, we have some phlox in the shade. It's doing okay. It still flowers beautifully. A little taller than our other ones, a little leggy, but it provides a really interesting height and an interesting look to it. Now I'm gonna add some salvias. I think we're gonna kind of fill everything in with salvias. Yeah, let's do some, play in the blues salvia and just kind of fill that throughout. I'm gonna go so heavy on the salvia this year. I'm really excited about it. I go heavy every year on the salvia, but it's really fun just to oh, just to plant things for the pollinators. It makes me really happy. I think the salvias will look pretty with the sunflowers and the Joe Pye weed back there. That's nice. Let's do a different salvia. Yeah, Rockin' Deep Purple. They have Rockin' Deep Purple, yay. I think I knew that. That's great. This is the hummingbird's favorite plant in our garden. They come here for everything. Every day, all day, they could be at this plant. They bring all their friends. They have a party at the Rockin' Deep Purple salvia. It's pretty cool. This is starting to look, I mean, it just looks so abundant, right? It looks so full and so abundant. I think I'm gonna do one more annual. I'm gonna do a verbena. Verbenas, the swallowtails love verbenas. Hummingbirds love them. All right, we could do some white, or maybe we'll do some purple. Let's do this soft purple. This is, yeah, we'll have that kind of splayed into the path on this little corner here. And I'll do a couple more. Now, I'm gonna go ahead and draw a little wildlife pond over here. Okay, that's not a great representation, but you kind of get the picture that that's a little bit of water. Let's see what that looks like. All right, I'd say good, not great, but you get the idea of that. So here's a little wildlife pond, and we want to just make sure that we have some rocks and stones, just some nice layered stones, so that our little friends can get into the water. This is kind of rough, this wildlife feature here, this wildlife pond, but you kind of get the idea. I didn't really leave any room for you to hang out, but you could have done something here where these salvias are. A couple of chairs would be really nice in that little space, or maybe instead of having this hydrangea here, you could have a little seating area with some stepping stones to it. But I think that is really fun and really nice, and it gives you a sense of how much you can do in a space like this. So we have shrubs, we have trees, we have perennials, we have some annuals in there, and so all different kinds of things, lots of native species, 2 water features. The wildlife in this garden is going to be so happy, and honestly, if I lived here, I would be too as the gardener. So what do you think? Do you like it? With just a little planning, you can create a wildlife-friendly garden that's as beautiful as it is beneficial. A sanctuary for nature and a peaceful retreat for you. I really hope you liked this video and found it useful. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and even share this video with a friend if you found it helpful in some way. And please share your own wildlife gardening tips down in the comments below. I love reading all of your comments. Thanks so much for being here, and I'll see you again soon. Bye.